So, we have expressed our life in this way, that we as members of this diocesan family strive to live with gratitude to God and a commitment to reconciliation, peace, justice and partnership through building communities who follow Jesus completely, unreservedly, sustained by continuously growing new leaders. So it's both a statement of intent and of aspiration, of hope and of confidence in the Holy Spirit. We are a diverse and lively diocese. We have small country churches lovingly cared for by their communities. We have congregations who have been shut out of their church for the best part of a decade, but still manage to celebrate and smile. But then with leadership like that, you've got to wonder, really. I did want to acknowledge all of those who support the work of our brothers and sisters in Polynesia. And it was a delight that Belinda was able to represent not only the primates, but also this diocese, which has had a strong relationship with the Diocese of Polynesia for the best part of 40 years. At the opening of the Moana Boys' Home at St Christopher's Home in Suva, some of you will know the remarkable ministry of the sisters and of that orphanage, and you'll know that the children who are cared for there would otherwise have struggled to live, let alone live lives as full as they do. But up until now, the boys, once they reach just pre-puberty, have had to move to another home on the other side of the main island of Fiji and to be cared for by people that they then have to get to know. And through remarkable efforts, including the efforts of people in this diocese, the Moana Boys' Home was opened just towards the end of June. And we were able to celebrate that. The last little threshold was met in terms of all of the furniture, the beds for the boys being supplied by the St John's College Trust Board, with really literally just days to go before the home was opened. We've celebrated ordinations and we've celebrated the faithful service of people who have served our diocese in lay leadership for more than 60 years. And some of those images help to capture some of that story. I want to return to the charge of last year because we need to continue to work at these two great challenges. I spoke about two significant rocks, if you like, facing up to the consequences of our history. I spoke about the land weeping and about the people suffering. Remember that I spoke about the confiscations of land through Waikato and Taranaki, the impact of that intergenerationally, not only in terms of economic and social reality, but in terms of health statistics, incarceration rates, the whole spectrum of social consequence when the whole economic substance of a people is removed. We have worked hard over the last 12 months in relation to the return of land at Rangiaowhia. Many of you know the story of Rangiaowhia, and I'll not rehearse it here, but simply to say that, as with so much of our history, the Church's role was ambivalent at best and treacherous at worst. And we need to face into the consequences of that, and that is no small or short task, and this diocese has worked at it for most of its history, since 1926. There have been significant commitments demonstrated through generations, but this, the worst massacre in New Zealand's history, has now had a step towards reconciliation around the return for the first time of land into the hands of Ngāti Apakura and Ngāti Hinatu, who had that land taken from them, Anglicans, many of them, through the history of what happened there. This has been a fraught period of engagement and will continue to be so. Trust is fragile. It's a vulnerable thing. It takes more than grand gestures to rebuild trust. It requires a commitment to relationship that is enduring and long-standing. And to Julie Guest, to the leadership of the parish of Te Awamutu, thank you. Thank you for navigating a very difficult space, continuing to navigate that space. When it's tempting to simply say this is too hard, you've said it is hard, but we're going to keep going. Enormously proud to be associated with you. In Taranaki, we have seen the outworking of many years of hard work, of hope, of pain, and of broken promises. But I hope you don't mind me doing this, Dean J, but maybe you're a better one to talk just a little bit about this than I am.
E piopa. Tēnā tātou, ka nui a te mihi ki a koutou o te pōnei. I am reminded of a verse comes to mind when I see these images. From John chapter 4. Do you not say, there are yet 4 months, then comes the harvest? Look, I tell you, lift up your eyes and see that the fields are white for harvest. Already the one who reaps is receiving wages and gathering fruit for eternal life, so that sower and reaper may rejoice together. For here the saying holds true, one sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap that for which you did not labour. Others have laboured, and you have entered into their labour. And these are images of reaping the fruit of what generations at Meritapu have laid before us. In particular, there's obviously 2 highlights of our tupuna, Uncle Tiki, Tutarangi Raumati, and of course Tā Paora, Sir Paul Reeves, and the work that they have laid out there at Meritapu. Essentially what is happening right now is that we are picking their fruit. What has happened since the opening of Te Wari Hononga on April the 13th this year is that from the following week, our people have returned to Pukaka, the sacred hill on which St. Mary's is built on. I would have thought it would have been between 2 to 3 years of our people dancing with us as the church, going, oh, do you really want to work with us, or do you really want to partner? But from the opening of the building, our people have been returning to the site every week. There are 2 kapahaka teams practicing every Tuesday night, Wednesday night. Our people are doing cultural communications with organisations, with schools, with headmasters in our space. It's absolutely phenomenal. Over the last month, we had between 170 to 200 people every night, Tuesday nights for a month. We had that amount of people coming into Te Wari Hononga to hear the story of our wakapapa, our ancestry, and that is Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and the partnership and the notion of co-governance. It's been truly amazing to see. So, yeah, kia ora, kia ora.
So we can be confident that if we keep our eye to the horizon, if we keep our hand to the tiller, we will navigate these difficult waters. And we will navigate these difficult waters for those who are yet unborn, like this tiny granddaughter of mine growing in the womb of one of the loveliest women I've met. It's for her now that I want to commit myself to this work. I want also to commit myself to a church that embraces every person as made in the very image of God, sacred and precious in God's sight. And for no one to be exposed to the kind of abuse which has been laid before us through the Royal Commission. Amanda's story is one of those of a life which was forever shattered by the abuse of others. And this was a story of reasonably positive process of engagement and redress, of restoration of relationship. But part of Amanda's story is that in the last few weeks, she has been so low as to not want to live anymore again. Two things out of that. One is that actually you can't heal 50 years of torment through one good process. And secondly, that relationships must endure. And we have to find ways of being faithful to those relationships constantly. Amanda is one, as I've said, of more than 600. Those who have been courageous enough to bring their stories to the Royal Commission. How many more are there? And how prepared are we to support within our communities? Because it's an extraordinary privilege and very demanding. And it should be our delight to want to exercise such care for a human soul that our communities are places in which people flourish. So we need to provide ongoing support. We need to pitch ourselves to the highest possible standards of care. We need a holistic and integrative response. We need to acknowledge through holistic redress that there will also have to be appropriate reparation. My estimates of what sits before us as a diocesan family in terms of historic abuse is between $2 and $6 million. Why such a range? Because quite simply, we need to seek out other possible survivors of the cases of abuse that we know. And that's a significant piece of work. But we cannot simply sit back and say, well, because we've dealt with the person who's been brave enough to come forward, that is the limit, the extent of the consequences of that particular situation, when we know there were more. That's part of the witness of the survivors who have spoken to us. So we have to seek out those individuals. And we have to say, we know that when you should have been safe, you were not. And we need to do what we can to acknowledge that and to provide support. So we have to face into the challenge of how we meet those responsibilities. At one level, the money is the easiest. The real challenge is the longevity of relationship. There are at least 5 areas that we will as a church have to address, and I'm enormously proud of members of this diocese who are already grasping the challenge and helping to pioneer some really important initiatives. Now, I was saying to Barnabas, now at the back, I was thanking him for being a guinea pig, for being willing to go through a background checking process. To those who also this year had applied for ordination discernment, they too have had the pause button pushed while we engage with a process which is much more in depth, much more comprehensive, much more demanding than anything that we've had in place before. Now, what we are convinced of is that the report of the Royal Commission will recommend to the government, notwithstanding that we're about to go into an electoral cycle and everyone's a little uncertain about what all that might mean, but the Commission will recommend a regulatory environment for all leadership in voluntary organisations, including ordained and lay leadership in churches. There'll be the kind of regulatory environment that teachers have always lived with, that doctors live with, that lawyers live with. All of those who are in the caring professions will find that there are these kinds of expectations. We want to get ahead of that. We want to work our way to what we believe is a best standard according to the gospel. And we hope that that will be ahead of whatever the government requires. So, Diocese of Waikato and Taranaki, Tui Amarangi o Te Mana o Te Whiki, we're working at a partnership to see whether we can build these elements together, bilingually, biculturally. What can we do together? What do we need to do separately? The 5 areas that I've identified there on the screen around how do we build a healthy culture? How do we measure the health of that culture? How do we maintain its health? How do we, when there has been a breach of professional standards, how do we help people through a process of addressing that breach? Whether it be someone who has been brave enough to make a disclosure or someone who is having to respond to that disclosure. Again, how do we ensure that we have developed a trauma-informed and a survivor-led redress process? And believe you me, that's easier said than done. How do we form and shape our education and training, and how do we, as I said, as I was describing in terms of background checking, how do we make sure that our auditing and screening processes are beyond acute? I think I said last year that experience of being questioned by the lead lawyer for the Royal Commission and the Anglican Inquiry, who took me back to documents from 1972 and took me through a sequence of 10 documents, internal documents to this church, where we pointed out to ourselves our failures in professional standards. We offered to ourselves solutions, and not one of those recommendations across that more than half a dozen 8-10 reports had been implemented. We cannot allow that to continue. So you remember that I said last time that as I went off to Lambeth in the middle of all of this, I was trying to get my head around whether as a diocese we were a viable vehicle for mission in the 21st century. And I asked the question then, and I still ask the question, is one option for this diocese to dissolve and to become part of 3 other dioceses? This weighs heavily, particularly at the Synod, where we have to make a choice about budget. And for the first time, we're confronted with the option of removing our grants to our 2 key social service and community development agencies, who work at the very front line of the kind of work that I've been talking about. Our Standing Committee brings that recommendation with huge reluctance, but we have been living beyond our means, and that's after a significant stripping back of diocesan resource. You'll remember the days when there were 7-8 staff members in the diocesan office in Hamilton. That's now down to 2.5. So let's just get a little bit of a picture of what this looks like fiscally for us. Now, I know you won't be able to see the figures, don't even try. Just remember Waikato Taranaki orange. What you have there is a comparison of all of the assets of all of the dioceses within Tikana Pākehā on the left-hand side. And then what you have on the right-hand side is a comparison of the non-property assets of all of the dioceses. And what you see there is that the income-earning assets that we have as a diocese, including all of the parishes that have investments, is amongst the smallest. And if we were to break that down, we'd see that actually the vast majority lives with you in the parishes. And the diocese has $5 million in the bishopric trust, and the bishopric, therefore, with one bishop, pays its way. We then have a look at the comparison between Tikana Pākehā and Tikana Māori. The blue is the Diocese of Waikato and Taranaki. The other segments are the whole of Tikana Māori. All 5 amarangi, all 5 Māori dioceses. That's the comparison of assets. Now, many of you will say, well, most of our assets are liabilities. So they are. If you look at the right-hand graph, what you see there is the whole of Tikana Pākehā's assets. The orange is Tikana Māori's assets. Now, at the time of the 1990 constitutional reform, we made a commitment as a church to ensure that Tikana Māori never had less than 14% of the total assets of this church. Currently, Tikana Māori's assets sit at 3%. This diocese, in its resource sharing in 1992, shared 16% of asset with Manawatupiki and Upoko Te Ika. That now represents really about 8% of our asset base, because our assets have been of the type that have significantly increased in value. What we gave to Tikana Māori represented assets that did not. This is not about mismanagement, as I've heard some suggest. This is about the kind of assets across Tikana Pākehā that were transferred. So we have to face into this reality as well. And then finally, well, not quite finally, I wanted to give you an idea of the split of income within the life of the diocese. The blue is what is generated through assessments, and we'll hear more tomorrow morning about where that goes. The grey is that which is provided to us through the St John's College Trust Board. Funding in this diocese through St John's Trust Board is the highest proportion of any diocese in Tikana Pākehā. We are more dependent upon that money than any of our Tikana Pākehā partners. The orange represents the bishopric and what is resourced and funded out of the bishopric, including some of the costs that have been attributed to the diocese through the standing committee accounts in the past. So, this question that I went to Lambeth with is still live, isn't it? Are we a viable vehicle for mission? You may remember that immediately post-Lambeth, I had the privilege of going to Assisi, and you may remember me telling you the story that Belinda got COVID while she was in Assisi, so she was stuck and I was a little bit freer, and I had time to do lots of reading, and we didn't do much of the touring that we had anticipated doing, and I reconnected with Francis of Assisi, both with the times in which he was living and the principles that he articulated about how to respond to those times. And you may remember that I drew some parallels between his time and our time, parallels between those principles that he set out before us, before the people of his time, and the challenges that we have for mission in front of us. And I asked the question, what if, as a diocesan family, we allowed God to strip us back to to the very essentials of being the people of the way, the people of the way of Jesus. What we have is the people. And for some reason, God is renewing us in quite remarkable ways. We certainly have the faith. And I see that not only in the resilience of the few who continue to hold the offering of worship in tiny communities around the spread out diocese, but also in the vibrancy of a new generation who are coming through in unprecedented numbers in the life of this diocese. What is that about, if it's not a sign from God? Are we going to take God seriously? And are we going to try and think creatively about how we shift our resources to where there could be growth and renewal? In terms of numerical strength, that will follow our commitment to renewal, a renewal of spirit, a renewal of faith, a commitment to justice, and a commitment to acknowledging and rectifying the past. We have that commitment, and we certainly have the talent. I don't think I have ever felt more optimistic about this interesting, diverse, challenging diocese than I do tonight. We are spread across these communities, across the worshipping communities of our diocese, but we also are embedded in our schools, communities of young people, many privileged, many who are not. We are served by two extraordinary agencies, Anglican Action and the Bishop's Action Foundation. I sit on the board of both. I see the work that is done. I see the work which is done that no one else is prepared to do. And I hear in the community leaderships, the leaders that I mix with, that in the case of both, they are recognised as being constant, competent, contributing to community well-being in a way that we can be proud of. So, you and I, we hold our faith, we hold our people, we hold the land, we hold our history, we hold our future as a sacred trust. For those of you that can't see what C.K. Chesterton said, which is the little quote off to the left in the last few slides, he said, "What a wonderful idea, this gospel idea, and what a great pity that so few have ever tried it." We are called to be worshipping, serving, witnessing, learning communities of faith. We can be those communities in every place, and we can, with the resources that we have, resource that work really well. You know better than me that some of the biggest challenges we face have to do with those assets that form such a large balance sheet. Those buildings we love or hate, or love to hate, or hate to love, but consume so much of our time, so much of our resource, so much of our focus. When we're called to be worshipping, witnessing, serving, learning communities. So back to that original question, what if, as a diocesan family, we allowed God to strip us back to the essential elements of being the people of the way? So what I want you to do is to mark a date. Mark a date for a conference for the diocese. We will prepare for this well. You will all be invited. Anyone will be welcome. We will bring the very best of our creativity, the very best of our ideas, the depth of our frustration, the reality of our challenges, and we will work it through together. We have more information available to us than we have ever had, thanks to some hard work over the last 12 months. about our fiscal reality, about our assets, about our trends in mission, about where things are working and where things are not working. We'll bring all of that into focus. So what if we allowed ourselves to be open to God, to strip us back to the essential elements of being the people of the way? And could we imagine, I asked you last year and I ask you again, could we imagine that we could reach a point where we might feel able to say to our neighbours, come and see? It was the last time any of us felt we were able to do that about something we were doing as a church. Come and see. Come and see how we encounter God through every practice at our disposal, how we preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, we will use words. Come and see how we love the poor. Come and see how we defend the earth. Come and see how we give dignity back to those who have lost it or given it away through desperation and loss of hope. Come and see how we love one another. Come and see how we stand for peace and justice and reconciliation. Come and see how we have been freed from consumerism and how we have become radically generous. Come and see our passion for beauty, because beauty is the pathway to God. Pathway laid open for us by Jesus, the pioneer of our salvation. That's the hope that's within us, and that's the challenge that's before us. Let us gather around the table where all are welcome and where there is enough for all.